Count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings and see what God has done. All right, you crazy beans, are you all ready for Thanksgiving tomorrow? Yes, I am ready. But I'm also sick, so I am probably going to stay home because I don't want to impact the in-laws with this terrible cold, viral infection, whatever you want to call it. But there's nothing you can do. You just have to wait it out. It was so much fun. Anyway, since tomorrow is Thanksgiving and it is Turkey Day, you all get to be turkeys. So we'll do that race here in just a second. Today's video is about a very, 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 very old movie. One I've heard of, never watched. It's supposed to be highly romantic. I'm not sure how, but to each their own. Hopefully you'll enjoy the little bits of history. Anyway, ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. This shout out is for our friends. Let's see who it is. It is a bunch of turkeys. Gobble, 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 gobble. Okay. There's Sandra. There's Zoe. There's Kara. Northern Woman. Black Beauty. Kara. Nut Podcast. There's Generations. There's Jerry. There's Raven. There's Duo. 5 Can Leech. A&M. Tissue. Ninja. 13. Sarah. Eastad. Easy. There's Fawn. Stats. There's Brad. Let's see. Mindfolk. Stony. Shadow. Mark. Who's it gonna be? Oh, Mindfolk. Yeah. Okay, this is the Mindfolks. Mindfolks. At 1K. If it's weird, you'll find it here. These guys are fun. They do all kinds of nifty things. Wood Wide Web. That sounds interesting. Classic movie night. UFOs. They've got some shorts, of course. And, of course, some lives. Search for Bigfoot. Fireside chats. So, if you're into the unusual, paranormal, or whatever, check them out. Like, share, comment. Have a good day. New video. Record. Alright, the historian is going to tell you about the ancient movie. Why ancient movie? Because movies.
Okay, class. Everybody know our TV here in black and white. It's a beautiful black and white screen. Trust me, it'll work perfect with this film. It's shot in black and white, so you'll love it.
I broke it. Oh, no.
1942, for those of us who were not even alive, not me. If you ever watched anything on the American Movie Classics or, the old TBS channels, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the middle of the day, you might have seen this by chance, or, odds are good, you've heard of it. You might not have seen it, but you've heard of it.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I have not seen it. I've never had a desire to see it.
Interestingly enough is that some of the stuff that I've read about it is kind of eye-opening. Casablanca. Casablanca. The town basically in Morocco at the time. The movie was actually shot and directed by Michael Curtis and starring Humphrey Bogart, Bogey, Ingrid Bergman, and Paul Henry. Now, it was filmed and set during World War II, would focus on an American expatriate, Bogart, who must choose between his love for a woman and helping her husband, a Czechoslovak resistance leader, escape from the Vichy-controlled city of Casablanca to continue his fight against the Nazis. For those of you who are wondering what the heck is a Vichy, after France fell in World War II, the country basically got split into two areas. There was the part that was occupied by the Germans, and then the second part had its capital set up in Vichy, France, and they were allies of Germany. Kind of a weird situation. But as it was, the screenplay was based on a play called Everybody Comes to Rick's, an unproduced stage play by Murray Burnett and Joan Allison. Supporting cast would feature Claude Rains, Conrad Viet, Sidney Greenstreet, Peter Lorre, and Dooley Wilson. Now, the thing that was kind of interesting that I saw, first of all, is that it was released on November the 26th, 1942, in Hollywood Theater. It actually would debut for nationwide audiences on January 23rd, 1943, the following year. Now, Warner Brothers story editor Irene Diamond convinced the producer Hal B. Wallace to purchase the film rights to the play in January of 1942. The brothers Julius and Philip G. Epstein were initially assigned to write the script. However, despite studio resistance, they left to work on Frank Capra's Why We Fight series early in 1942. While Howard Koch was assigned to screenplay until the Epsteins would return a month later. Principal photography was shot in May 25th, 1942, ending on August 3rd. The film was shot entirely at the Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank, California, in beautiful downtown Burbank. With the exception of one sequence that was shot at the Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles. Now, interesting part, it says, although Casablanca was an A-list film with established stars and first-rate writers, no one involved in its production expected it to stand out among many pictures produced by Hollywood yearly. Casablanca was rushed into release to take advantage of the publicity from the Allied invasion of North Africa a few weeks earlier. So kind of, this is what we did in real life. Go to Hollywood and see what we shot. It would be at the world premiere in New York City and then nationally on the 23rd of January. The film was a solid, if unspectacular, success in its initial run. And exceeding expectations, Casablanca went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture, while Curtis was selected as Best Director, and the Epsteins and Koch were honored for Best Adapted Screenplay. Its reputation has gradually grown to the point that its lead characters, memorable lines, and pervasive theme songs have all become iconic and consistently ranks near the top of the list of the greatest films in history. Here's looking at you, kid. Now, in the inaugural class of 1989, the United States Library of Congress would select the film as one of the first for preservation in the National Film Registry for culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Roger Ebert would write, if there ever was a time when they decide that some movie should be spelled with an uppercase M, Casablanca would be voted first on the list of movies. Now, this is what was interesting. The film's copyright was renewed in 1970. It will enter public domain in the U.S. and countries with the rule of shorter term in January 1st, 2038.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's pretty well sealed up. Now, plot-wise, December 1941, American expatriate Rick Blaine owns a nightclub and gambling den in Casablanca. Rick's Café American attracts a varied clientele, including Vichy French and German officials, refugees desperate to reach the still neutral United States, and those who prey on them. Although Rick professes to be neutral in all matters, he ran guns to Ethiopia in 1935 and fought on the Republican side of the Spanish Civil War. Small note for those of you who are still following along and not sleeping, spoiler alert. Now, Petty Crook Ugarde boasts to Rick of letters of transit obtained by murdering 2 German couriers. The papers allow the bearers to travel freely around German-occupied Europe and to neutral Portugal.
Ooh.
Ugarde plans to sell them at the club and persuades Rick to hold on to them for him. However, Ugarde is arrested by the local police under Captain Louis Renault, and unabashedly corrupt prefect of police.
Oops.
Ugardi is killed while in custody without revealing that Rick has the letters. Then, the reason for Rick's cynical nature, former lover Issa Lund enters the establishment. Spotting Rick's friend and the house pianist, Sam, Issa asks him to play as time goes by. Rick storms over, furious that Sam disobeyed his order never to perform that song again, and is stunned to see Issa. She is accompanied by her husband, Victor Laszlo, a renowned fugitive of Czechoslovak resistance leader. A flashback reveals Ilsa left Rick without explanation when the couple were planning to flee as the German army neared Paris, embittering Rick. Laszlo and Ilsa need the letters to escape, while German Major Strasser arrives in Casablanca to prevent this. No. Now, while Laszlo makes inquiries, Signor Ferrari, an underworld figure and Rick's friendly business rival, divulges his suspicion that Rick has the letters. Laszlo would return to Rick's cafe that night and tries to buy them. Rick refuses to sell, telling Laszlo to ask his wife why. They're interrupted when Strasser leads a group of German officers in singing Die Watch am Rhein. Laszlo orders the house band to play Les Marseillais. Basically, the Germans and the French are pissing each other off.
Yeah.
Rick allows it. Patriotism grips the crowd and everyone joins it, drowning out the Germans. Afterwards, Strasser has Renault close the club under flimsy pretext. Kind of got pissed off.
Oh, man.
Now, later, Ilsa confronts Rick in the deserted cafe. When he refuses to give her the letters, she threatens him with a gun.
Oh, no.
But then confesses she still loves him. She explains that when they met and fell in love in Paris in 1940, she believed her husband had been killed while attempting to escape from a concentration camp. When he learned that Laszlo is alive and hiding near Paris, she left Rick without explanation to nurse her sick husband. Rick's bitterness dissolves. He agrees to help, letting Ilsa believe she will stay with him while Laszlo leaves Casablanca. When Laszlo unexpectedly shows up, having narrowly escaped a police raid on a resistance meeting, Rick has a waiter, Carl, spirit Ilsa away. Laszlo, aware of Rick's love for Ilsa, tries to persuade him to use the letters to take her to safety. When the police arrest Laszlo on trumped-up charge, Rick persuades Renault to release him by promising to set Laszlo up for a much more serious crime, possession of the letters. To allay Renault's suspicions, Rick explains that he and Ilsa will use the letters to leave for America. When Renault tries to arrest Laszlo as arranged, however, Rick forces him at gunpoint to assist in their escape. At the last moment, Rick makes Ilsa board the plane to Lisbon with Laszlo, telling her that she would regret if she stayed. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, and for the rest of your life.
Oh, no.
Strasser, tipped off by Renault, drives up alone. Strasser attempts to stop the plane and draws a gun on Rick. The latter shoots him dead. When policemen arrive, Renault pauses, then orders them to round up the usual suspects. Another great line. He suggests to Rick that they join the Free French of Brazzaville. As they walk away into the fog, Rick says, "Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." They had so many lines in that movie, it was crazy. The play would consist of 16 speaking parts and several extras. The film script enlarged to 22 speaking parts and hundreds of extras. The cast is notably international. Only 3 of the credited actors were born in the U.S., Bogart, Dooley, Wilson, and Joy Page. The top-billed actors are, again, Humphrey Bogart as Rick Blaine, Ingrid Bergman as Ilsa Lund. Bergman's official website calls Ilsa her most famous enduring role. The Swedish actress's Hollywood debut in Intermezzo was well received, but her subsequent films were not major successes until Casablanca. Film critic Robert Ebert called her luminous and commented on the chemistry with Bogart. She paints his face with her eyes. Other actresses considered for the role of Ilsa included Anne Sheridan, Hedy Lamarr, Louise Rainier, and Michelle Morgan. Producer Hal Wallace obtained the services of Bergman, who was contracted to David O. Selznick by lending Olivia de Havilland in exchange. Let's trade off actresses.
Right? I'll take this one, I'll take that one.
Yeah. Paul Henritt as Victor Laszlo. Henritt, an Austrian actor who had immigrated in 1935, was reluctant to take the role. It set him as a stiff forever, according to Pauline Kael, until he was promised top billing along with Bogart and Bergman. Henry did not get along well with his fellow actors. He considered Bogart a mediocre actor, and Bergman called Henry a prima donna. The second billed actors were Claude Rains as Captain Louis Renault, Conrad Veidt as Major Heinrich Strasser. Veidt was a refugee German actor who had fled the Nazis with his Jewish wife, but frequently played Nazis in American films. He was the highest paid member of the cast despite the second billing. He died shortly after the film's release. Sidney Greenstreet as Signor Ferrari, Peter Lorre as Signor Ugarte. Also credited was Kurt Boyes as the pickpocket. Boyes had one of his longest careers in cinema, spanning over 80 years. Leonid Kinski as Sasha, the Russian bartender infatuated with Yvonne. Kinski told Eugene Harmetz, author of Round Up the Usual Suspects, The Making Casablanca, that he was cast because he's Bogart's drinking buddy. He was not the first choice for the role. He replaced Leo Mostoy, who was deemed not funny enough.
Huh.
Madeleine LeBeau as Lavon, Rick's soon-discarded girlfriend. LeBeau was a French refugee who had left the Nazi-occupied Europe with her husband, Marcel Dalio, who was a fellow Casablanca performer. She was the last surviving cast member until her death, May 1st, 2016.
Oh, wow.
Mm. Joy Page, the stepdaughter of studio head Jack L. Warner, as Ananina Brandy, the young Bulgarian refugee. John Quallen as Berger, Laszlo's resistance contact. S.Z. Sakal, credited as S.K. Sakal, as Carl the waiter. Dooley Wilson as Sam. Wilson was one of the few American-born members of the cast. And now they had notable uncredited actors. Marcel Dalio as Emile the Croupier. Dalio had been a star in French cinema, appearing in Jean Renoir's Le Grand Illusion and Le Relais du Jour. Helmut Dietane as John Bardet, the Bulgarian roulette player married to Ananina Brandel. Gregory Gay as the German banker who is refused entry into the casino by Rick. Torben Meyer as the Dutch banker who runs the second largest banking house in Amsterdam. Corina Mura was the guitar player who sings Tango de la Rose, or Tango de la Rosa, and later accompanies the crowd in La Marseillaise. Frank Puglia as the Moroccan rug merchant. Richard Reen as Colonel Heinz, Strasser's aide. Dan Seymour as Abdul the doorman. Gerald Oliver Smith as the Englishman whose wallet is stolen, and Norma Vardine as the Englishwoman whose husband has a wallet stolen.
Huh.
Now, much of this emotional impact of the film for the audience in 1942 has been attributed to a large proportion of European exiles and refugees who were extras or played in minor roles in addition to leading actors Paul Henreid, Conrad Veidt, and Peter Lorre, such as Louis V. Arco, Trude Berliner, Erika Grünig, Ludwig Strassel, Hans Reinhard von Twazarski, and Wolfgang Zitzer. A witness to the filming of the Duel of the Anthem sequence saw many of the actors crying and realized that they were all real refugees. Harnetz argues that they brought to a dozen small roles in Casablanca an understanding and a desperation that could never come from central casting. Even though many were Jewish or refugees of the Nazis or both, they were frequently cast as Nazis in various war films because of their accents. Jack Benny may have appeared as an unbilled cameo and was claimed by a contemporary newspaper advertisement and in the Casablanca press book. When asked in his column, Movie Answer Man, critic Robert Ebert first replied, "It looks something like him, that's all I can say." In the later column, he responded with the follow-up commenter, "I think you're right. The Jack Benny fan club can feel vindicated." Now, writing, the film was based on a Murray Burnett and Joan Allison's unproduced play, Everyone Comes to Rick's. The Warren Brothers story analyst who read the play, Stephen Cornett, said approvingly, "Sophisticated hokum." And the story editor Irene Diamond, who had discovered the script on a trip to New York in 1941, convinced Hal Wallace to buy the rights for $20,000.
Oh, wow.
That is a bargain.
That is a bargain.
Equivalent to about $330,000 in today's money, but the most anyone in Hollywood ever paid for an unproduced play. The project was renamed Casablanca, apparently in imitation of the 1938 hit Algiers. Casablanca also shares many narrative and thematic similarities with Algiers, which itself was a remake of the acclaimed 1937 film Pepe Le Molko, directed and co-written by Julien Devalliere. The original play was inspired by a trip to Europe made by Murray Burnett and his wife in 1938, during which they visited Vienna shortly after the Anschluss and were affected by the anti-Semitism they saw. In the south of France, they went to a nightclub that had a multinational clientele, among them many exiles and refugees, and the prototype of Sam. In The Guardian, Paul Fairclough wrote that the Cinema Vox in Tangier was Africa's biggest when it opened in 1935, with 2,000 seats and a retractable roof. As Tangier was in Spanish territory, the theater's wartime bar heaved with spies, refugees, and underworld hoods, securing its place in cinematic history as the inspiration for Rick's Cafe in Casablanca. The scene of the singing of Las Montserrat in the bar is attributed to the film scholar Julian Jackson as an adaptation of a similar scene in Jean Renard's film Le Grand Illusion 5 years prior. The first writers assigned to the script were twins Julius and Philip Epstein, who, against the wishes of Warner Brothers, left at Frank Capra's request early to work on the Why We Fight series in Washington, D.C. While they were gone, the other credited writer, Howard Koch, was assigned, and he produced 30 to 40 pages. Well, when the Epstein brothers finally returned after about a month, they were reassigned to Casablanca, and contrary to what Koch claimed in two published books, his work was not used. The Epstein brothers and Koch never worked in the same room at the same time during the writing of the script. In the final budget for the film, the Epsteins were paid about $30,416, and Koch would earn $4,200. Now, in the play, Ilsa's character is an American named Louis Meredith. She does not meet Laszlo until after her relationship with Rick and Paris had ended. Rick is a lawyer. The play, set entirely in the cafe, ends with Rick sending Lois and Laszlo to the airport. To make Rick's motivation more believable, Wallace Curtis and the screenwriters decided to set the film before the attack on Pearl Harbor. The possibility was discussed of Laszlo being killed in Casablanca, allowing Rick and Elsa to leave together, but as Casey Robinson wrote to Wallace before filming began, the ending of the film set up a swell twist with Rick sends her away playing with Laszlo. For now, in doing so, he is not just solving a love triangle. He is forcing the girl to live up to the idealism of her nature, forcing her to carry on with her work, and these days is far more important than the love of just two little people. It was certainly impossible for Isa to leave Laszlo for Rick, as the motion picture production code forbade showing a woman leaving her husband for another man. The concern was not whether Ilsa would leave with Laszlo, but how this outcome would be engineered. According to Julius Epstein, he and Philip were driving when they simultaneously came up with the idea for Renault to order the roundup of the usual suspects, after which all the details needed for the resolution of the story, including the farewell between Bergman and a suddenly noble Bogart, were rapidly worked out. The uncredited Casey Robinson assisted with 3 weeks of rewrites, including contributing the series of meetings between Rick and Ilsa at the cafe. Koch highlighted the political and melodramatic elements, and Curtis seemed to have favored the romantic parts, insisting on retaining the Paris flashbacks. In a telegram to film editor Owen Marks on August 7, 1942, Wallace suggested 2 possible final lines of dialogue for Rick. Louis, I might have known you would mix your patriotism with a little larceny, or, Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. 2 weeks later, Wallace settled on the latter, which Bogart recalled to dub a month after shooting had finished. Bogart's line, "Here's looking at you, kid," said 4 times, was not in the draft screenplays, but had been attributed to a comment he made to Bergman as she played poker with her English coach and hairdresser between takes. Despite the many writers, the film is as what Ebert describes as a wonderfully unified and consistent script. Koch later claimed it was the tension between his own approach and Curtis's that accounted for this. Surprisingly, This disparate approach is somewhat meshed, and perhaps was the party that tugged the war between Curtis and me that gave the film a certain balance. Julius Upstein later noted that the screenplay contained more corn than the states of Kansas and Iowa combined. But when corn works, there's nothing better. I think Kansas and Iowa should be offended.
They should be offended.
Now, the film ran into some trouble with Joseph Breen of the Production Code Administration, the Hollywood self-censorship body, who opposed the suggestion that Captain Renault extorted sexual favors from visa applicants and that Rick and Issa had slept together. Extensive changes were made, with several lines of dialogue removed or altered. All direct references to sex were deleted. Renault's selling of visas for sex.
How you never yield.
I know. Rick and Ilsa's previous sexual relationship were implied elliptically rather than referenced explicitly. Also, in the original script, when Sam plays As Time Goes By, Rick exclaims, "What the blank are you playing?" This line was altered to, "Sam, I thought I told you to never play," to conform to Breen's objection to the implied swear word. Now, although the film's initial date was selected for April 10th, 1942, delays led to production starting on May 25th. Filming was completed on August 3rd. It went $75,000 over budget for a total cost of $1,139,000, equivalent to about $15,000 in 2024's money. Above average for the time. Unusually, when a film is shot in sequence, mainly because only the first half of the script is ready when the filming began. Now, the entire picture was shot in the studio, again, except for the sequence involving Strasser's arrival and the close-ups of the Lockheed Electra, filmed at the Van Nuys Airport, and a few short clips of stock footage views of Paris. The street used exterior shots have recently been built for another film, The Desert Song, and redressed for the Paris flashbacks. The film critic Roger Ebert called Wallace the key creative force for the attention to the details of production, down to the insisting the real parrot in the Blue Parrot bar. The difference between Bergman and Bogart's height caused some problems. She was 2 inches taller than Bogart, and claimed Curtis had Bogart stand on blocks or sit on cushions in their scenes together. Later, there was planned for a further scene showing Rick, Renault, and a detachment of Free French soldiers on a ship to incorporate the Allies' 1942 invasion of North Africa. It proved too difficult to get Claude Rains for the shoot, and the scene was eventually abandoned after David O. Selznick judged it would be a terrible mistake to change the ending. The background of the final scene, which shows the Lockheed Model 12 Electra Jr. airplane with personnel walking around it, was staged using little person extras and proportional cardboard plane. Fog was used to mask the model's unconvincing appearance. Let's bring in the fog. Now, under direction, Wallace's first choice for director was William Wyler, but he was unavailable, so Wallace turned to his close friend, Michael Curtis. Robert had commented that Casablanca very few shots are memorable as shots, and Curtis wanted images to express the story rather than to stand alone. He contributed relatively little to the development of the plot. Casey Robinson said Curtis knew nothing whatever about story. He saw it in pictures, and you supplied the stories. Critic Andrew Sarris called the film the most decisive exception to the auteur theory, of which Sams was the most prominent proponent of the United States. Algernon Hartmutz has responded nearly every Warner Brother picture, with exception to the auteur theory. Other critics give more credit to Curtis. Sidney Rosenwig, in the study of the director's work, sees the film as a typical example of Curtis highlighting a moral dilemma. Some of the second unit montages, such as the opening sequence with the refugee trail and the invasion of France, were directed by Don Siegel. The cinematographer was Arthur Edison, a veteran who had previously shot The Maltese Falcon and Frankenstein. Particularly attention was paid to the photographic Bergman. She was shot mainly from her preferred left side, often with a softening gauze filter and to catch lights to make her eyes sparkle. The whole effect was designed to make her face seem ineffably sad and tender and nostalgic. Bars of shadow across the characters, and the background variously imply imprisonment, and the cross of Lorraine, the symbol of the Free French forces and emotional turmoil. Dark film noir and expressionist lighting was used in several scenes, particularly towards the end of the picture. Roswig argues that these shadow and lighting effects are classic elements of the Curtis style, along with fluid camera work and the use of environment as framing devices. Now, the music, as mentioned, was written by Max Steiner. The song, As Time Goes by Herman Hupfeld, had been part of the story from the original play. Steiner wanted to write his own composition to replace it, but Bergman had already cut her hair short for her next role, Maria, in For Whom the Bell Tolls, and she could not reshoot the scenes that incorporated the song. So Steiner based the entire score on it and Les Miserables, the French national anthem, transforming them as motifs to reflect the changing moods. Even though Steiner disliked As Time Goes By, he admitted that in a 1943 interview that it must have been something to attract so much attention, particularly memorable in the duel of the anthems between Strasser and Laszlo at Rick's Cafe. In the soundtrack, La Miserables is played by a full orchestra. Originally, the opposing pieces of this iconic sequence was to be Horst Wessel Lied, the Nazi anthem, but this was still under international copyright in non-Allied countries. Instead, Die Wasch am Rhein was used. The Deutschlandlied, the national anthem of Germany, is used several times in a minor mode and leitmotif as for the German threat, e.g. the scene in Paris, as it is announced that the German army will reach Paris the next day. It is featured in the final scene, giving away to Le Miserables after Strasser is shot. Other songs included It Had to Be You by Isham Jones, lyrics by Gus Kahn, Shine, music by Ford Dabney, lyrics by Cecil Mack and Lee Brown, Avalon, music by and lyrics by Al Jolson, Buddy De Silva, and Vincent Rose, Perfida by Alberto Dominguez, The Very Thought of You by Ray Noble, Knock on Wood, music by M.K. Jerome, lyrics by Jack Scholl, the only original song, I'm Just Wild About Harry by Yumi Blake, Heaven Can Wait by Jimmy Van Heusen, Parlez-vous d'amour by Jean Lenoir, Love for Sale by Cole Porter. Now, Dooley Wilson, who played Sam, was a drummer, not a pianist, so his piano playing was performed by Gene Plummer. After shooting had been completed, producer Wallace considered dubbing over Wilson's voice for his singing. Now, very few films of the early 1940s had portions of their soundtrack released on 78 RPM records, and Casablanca was no exception. In 1997, almost 55 years after the film's premiere, Turner Entertainment, in collaboration with Rhino Records, issued the film's first original soundtrack album for release on compact disc, including the original songs and music, spoken dialogue, and alternate takes. The piano featured in the Paris flashback sequences was sold in New York City on December 14, 2012, at Sotheby's for more than $600,000.
Wow.
The piano Sam plays at Rick's Cafe American, put up for auction with other film memorabilia by Turner Classic Movies at Bonham's in New York, would sell for $3.4 million. Now, although the initial release date was anticipated in early '43, Casablanca debuted at the Hollywood Theater in New York on the 26th of November 1942 to capitalize on Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of French North Africa, and the capture of Casablanca. It went into general release January 23, 1943, to take advantage of the Casablanca Conference, a high-level meeting between Prime Minister Winston Churchill and President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Office of War Information prevented screening of the film to troops in North Africa, believing it would cause resentment among Vichy supporters in the region. But that is our little tidbit on history. So if you get a chance, go catch out some Casablanca, enjoy some history, and here's looking at you, kid.
Bah.
Bah.
I buy you.
I buy you back.
I don't believe it.
Night, folks. We'll see you next week.
31 minutes and 30 seconds.